Hello, welcome back to another YouTube video. Today I'm going to be doing my 14.8 jungle tier list. So if you enjoy the content, like, subscribe, and let's get into it. So if there were a couple of changes this patch, we saw some nerfs come through to some of the stronger performing solo queue junglers, and we saw some buffs towards some of the champions which were kind of being pushed towards MSI, or in Skylar's case, very much underperforming. He is now overperforming. He got hotfix nerfed, but I'll cover that. So let's go through from more detail. To begin with, Sejuani is staying at the bottom of the C tier. She's still very much underperforming solo queue. I wouldn't recommend playing this champion in her current state. She's probably kind of getting to the point where she's falling out of pro play, and thus we might see some changes come through, kind of push her more towards solo queue, less into competitive. But yeah, in her current state, she's very much pro skewed. Wouldn't recommend playing her in solo queue. Elise is just an underperforming elite skewed jungler. Not something I'd recommend at the moment. Same goes for Rengar. Rengar, in Rengar's case, he is performing well in elite still. He's just very much underperforming in mid to low elo, which once again, Tierlist is targeted towards mid elo. I would not recommend playing Rengar. Rengar is probably the closest champion towards the D tier, purely on the basis of this champion has the highest, or one of the highest skill ceilings in the entire game, making him incredibly elite skewed. Honestly, unless you're like the top 0.2%, there's not really any point playing this champion unless you are willing to put the games in, learn the mechanics, learn the pathing, learn the clears, stuff like this. I wouldn't recommend playing Rengar at the moment, though. He's in the C tier. Teemo is also going to be in the C tier. He is a bit more mid-low elo skewed than a lot of the other picks. He's just not performing as well in the jungle as he was towards the beginning of this season. Definitely very low elo skewed, if anything. He's pretty decent in iron to plat, I'd say. But then once you get out of plat, he starts falling off. He is very much a scaling pick when you play him in the jungle. You're running things like the Dark Harvest, and then just playing around your shrooms, getting a huge amount of damage and zone control off of that through them. But yeah, for the most part, very low elo skewed. Wouldn't really recommend playing Teemo in the jungle. Olaf is also going to be in the C tier. Actually, Olaf is going to move up to the B tier. Olaf was already quite close towards the B tier. The changes this patch were very minimal, but enough to push him up. He is going to get nerfed in 14.9, but as this is covering 14.8, he's going to stay within the B, or he's going to move up to the B tier and stay in the B tier for the moment. The clear speed is a bit better later on into the game. He still struggles with the fact that he needs a lot of items and is a bit comp reliant and reliant on playing into things which he's good into. Champions with lots of heavy CC where you can make value out of your ultimate. He is good value there. He works quite nicely into Lee Sin as well, who is a very popular champion at the moment. I believe the most popular jungler in the game. And yeah, Olaf, solid B tier pick. Good as an answer to a lot of things if you can find the situations to play him in. Silas is moving up from the D tier into the C tier. He has finally reached a point where he is good enough to move up. No longer a troll pick, more of a low tier viable flex option. Once again, I wouldn't recommend primarily playing this champion in the jungle. He is now an option if you are filled and you are like a Silas mid, Silas top player, and you can play him within the jungle. He still struggles with his clear. It's not particularly fast. He is a bit too reliant on getting kills to be able to elevate his lead and just push through with that, opting into things like the Dark Seal, the Magi, running like Electrocute, being a bit more of an AP assassin rather than an AP bruiser. But yeah, for the most part, he's in the C tier, kind of mid-low end of C tier, but still a C tier option. Maokai is getting dangerously close to falling off the tier list. He's really dropped in popularity at this point within the jungle, and I just wouldn't recommend playing him. He is also very elite skewed, or pro skewed, not even elite skewed. He's just not great within solo queue at this point. Of course, got heavily nerfed because of support Maokai. They tried to give him some compensation within the jungle, but it just wasn't enough, and he is dangerously close to just dropping out the tier list. No one really plays him anymore, so he sits within the C tier. Zed also going to move in my C tier. He's a fine pick if you are proficient at Zed, but that is a reliance on being proficient, so you tend to come from mid to jungle. You wouldn't recommend him as like a pure jungle. If you want something a bit more AD assassin then you do have lots of other options, of course, like the Kha'Zix. Talon is a good mid to jungle flex, better than Zed, tends to be a bit more consistent, have a bit better of a clear. But yeah, Zed more of a C-tier pick. Not a huge amount I can really recommend on this champion. Shyvana, also getting my C-tier. I'm not... Shyvana, of course, is very low elo skewed. And I just can't recommend this champion while she's in her current state. Neither of her builds, the AP and the AP Bruiser, AD tank, you've got some like options there, are particularly performant. And she just isn't finding the level of success she should really be finding within low to mid. If she gets buffed, then I would begin to recommend this champion. Of course, when she is strong, she is definitely an easy to play, relatively like strong AP mid to frontline kind of option. Unless you are playing full AP caster, then she is a really consistent AP damage output. When she is strong, when she is weak, she's unreliable. She doesn't consistently hold her ult up, so she loses out on that DPS. And yeah, she can really struggle when not far ahead in the game. Moving on to the B tier, Graves stays as a low B tier option. The changes weren't enough to really push him out of the B tier. If anything, he lost a lot of win rate because people moved over to the crit builds in a lot of situations where they should have just been going the lethality options. I believe Clips also got nerfed for ranged champions this patch, which did hurt Graves. It was kind of like a hidden nerf where the shield value was... the shield value on Eclipse was actually activating at like the melee value for ranged champions, so this was indirectly a nerf towards things like Graves and Kaiser. In Graves' case, he also had a bug with the reload where if you built attack speed, it was actually a nerf. They then removed this in the B patch. They gave him just a generic attack speed buff. I believe it's gone from 2.6 to 3 per level. I don't see him moving out of the B tier for the moment, but yeah, definitely watch his space. There could be some builds which like start to pop up. Maybe he has some viable options. Things like Storm Razor could be promising, but for the most part, he's in the B tier at the moment. Mordekaiser, also going to be added to the tier list. Mordekaiser, Rumble, and Gwen are the 3 champions I'm adding at the moment. I'll talk about the other 2 in a minute, but Mordekaiser is going to be dropped into my B tier. He's a fine flex option if you're looking for like an AP bruiser option. He's one of the solid ones within the jungle. He's just not as reliable as a lot of the other options. Of course, the ultimate gaining the reliability has definitely made him more of a promotable option. Not being able to QSS that in situations definitely gives him a bit more power scaling up through the ranks. Of course, he was already decent within low elo, just not really promotable like mid into high. But now, of course, the changes come through. His cleared speed's a bit better. The Q losing 1 second early on has definitely helped him in that. Yeah, a solid B tier option. Moving on, so Kayn is going to also be within my B tier. Both red and blue Kayn, I believe, are fairly similar at this point. I haven't quite checked the win rate variation between the 2 builds, but of course, Blue Kayn took the big hit with Profane Hydra being nerfed. You can no longer activate that during the queue. From what it looks like, Red Kayn is the way to go. Definitely has a large win rate disparity. In fact, like a 2% win rate, red to blue. But of course, blue is over. People tend to overgo on blue. Not every game is a blue game. You sometimes do need the front line and the juggernaut, like the bruisery option into like heavy tanky comps where you can make use of your percentage health maximum damage. Of course, Blue Kayn's still very good into very heavy squishy comps where you're able to get blue orbs consistently into maybe multiple ranged laners. But yeah, Kayn sits as like a high B, low A tier option at the moment. Shaco also going to be my B tier. He's definitely a bit more elite skewed. Well, maybe not elite skewed. More of an OTP skewed champion. You want to put a lot of games into this pick as he has like very unique mechanics. Of course, the clone is a lot different to most. Well, it's very different to most champions within the game. He does have build variations. Primarily, you are going with lethality options, but I have seen some people begin to go like Eclipse into like AP options. Of course, I believe AP Shaco is still a very viable option and can be something you opt into certain games. It's not a thing for every game, and sometimes you do just need that snowball potential with AD when you do have like AP tanky solo laners. But if you do need AP, you are solo AP within the game, but it is definitely something you can opt into. However, difficulty of the champion definitely like prohibits it. It's more of a B tier option at the moment, but definitely some merit when you do put the games into this pick. Nidali, very elite skewed. Of course, this champion has been elite skewed since the beginning of time. She got buffed early on in the season, got nerfed back down as she was performing too well, and now she sits in the B tier. Talon, of course, I spoke about Talon a second ago, is a more consistent AD jungler. Tends to clear a bit better than Zed. Zed has a really fast clear, but then Talon can oftentimes invade, poach away jungle more consistently, and can get like advantages through that. Of course, Talon's team fighting tends to be a bit better than Zed's. Zed's single target picking potential, very strong, but so is Talon's. Just not as strong as Zed's. Zed tends to be held a bit weaker than Talon, primarily because of his frustration and his ban rate, which can like prohibit him from having a decent win rate. Talon, solid B tier option, a good AD pick. Kha'Zix also going to sit here. Kha'Zix very solid into Xin Zhao. Of course, we've seen Canyon bring it out. Was it Canyon? I believe it was Canyon who brought it out against T1. I might be wrong on that, but I believe that is the game. And then, oh yeah, because when Genji turned the series around, brought it back. Yeah, so Canyon brought out Kha'Zix as an answer to Xin Zhao. Worked particularly well in the isolation 1v1 battles. Of course, the pick is really nice when you're able to consistently invade. You've got relatively strong solo laners which can help you out. His W is a very oppressive tool once you hit 11 if you are putting points in that. You can even put it early on in 6 if you want to be able to gain access to that slow, the AoE slow from the W. Of course, Q is better for clear speed if that's the Evo route you take. Kha'Zix, very solid AD option. Tends to be a bit more high elo skewed, but still a solid pick. Gragas also going to be my B tier. He's a solid AP assassin. He tends to be a bit more elite skewed than some of the other AP assassin options, but still sits quite nicely within the B tier. He has been nerfed as of recently for the top lane. His Q mana cost went up and his base HP went down. He struggles with Stormrazor also being a bit weaker, and Lich Bane, of course, receiving a couple of nerfs, and that's why he sits within the B tier. If these items were what they previously were, then he'll probably be closer to the A and maybe even S tier. Eve also going to be on my B tier. We're actually planning on nerfing Eve in patch 14.9, which is genuinely surprising. Of course, the pick tends to be very elite skewed, and is a very big frustration point there. Within low elo and mid elo, it doesn't tend to find the same level of success. It's not something I'd recommend as much. Of course, if you enjoy playing Eve, she's still a very solid AP option. Just better in circumstances where you are able to access that AP assassin, whether you have like an AD mid option, but then in those circumstances, I'd recommend playing Diana. Diana, very solid pick at the moment. Something which has a lot of consistency, a good clear speed, and does a lot of damage. Eve, going to be within my B tier. Kindred, also going to be my B tier. Also, another elite skew pick. A lot of the B tier options are good with an elite play. Tend to drop down a couple of tiers within mid-elo. Of course, if you put the games into them, you can find a lot of success. That is oftentimes what you'll find with the B tier. That is where a lot of these champions lie. C tier tends to be a bit on the weaker side or very, very elite skewed. But yeah, Kindred, solid B tier option. We've seen Zoom play it today in the LPL. Had very large amounts of success. Of course, he is one of the best Kindred players in the world, but still a solid solo queue option. If you're able to consistently get your marks and you're very confident in your invade timings and you understand jungle, like the jungle camps AI and like being able to be very mobile around the map, then Kindred is a great pick. However, you do have to learn all of these, so she sits within the B tier. Jarvan, actually, no, I'm going to put Jarvan up a tier. Hecarim is definitely underperforming this season, hasn't really found his footing. Opportunity, however, has looked very promising on this pick. Alongside that, you are still going with things like Yasuo Shojin, but yeah, he's not finding the same level of consistency for a relatively simple to play champion, so he sits within the B tier for the moment. Wukong definitely finds a bit more success within the jungle. He has been buffed twice now, I believe, primarily for top lane, but indirectly, of course, has helped jungle Wukong. You're looking at things like the Trinity into Sinner Sky, Steric build, and you tend to drop Eclipse when you're going jungle. You don't tend to be as reliant on this item. But yeah, still a solid AD bruiser option within the jungle. Definitely scales really nicely into the late mid, early late game. That is where most of its power lies. Poppy is also going to be within my beta. She's a great counter pick. Not something I'd recommend every game, but still very solid when you get her in counter pick situations. I would very much recommend going with Cindered Sky Deadman's variation. The tank build just doesn't have the same level of reliability, doesn't really keep up with win rate either. It does have situations where it's good, of course, if you do need to be a full frontline option. There is merit to it, and if enemy comp is very AD heavy, Iceborne works for a great Sheen item. But you do really need you really want to go for Cindered Sky item at the moment, and you really want to go Deadman's. Both these items are incredibly good on this pick. Poppy support, also incredible pick. I'll talk about one in the support video, but there is lots of merit to flexing this champion around, especially if you're just kind of drafting her in flex, for example. Moving on to the A tier, so I'm going to add Gwen and Rumble. Both these champions are performing quite well in the jungle at the moment. They're very underplayed, so it's kind of hard to really pinpoint where these champions are actually located. But Rumble, of course, received his change where he went from 100 heat to 150 heat cap. Alongside that, they gave him some jungle buffs, and he has just been finding a bit more success over time with these changes and finds himself within the A tier for the moment. Gwen also got jungle directed changes a couple patches ago. Might have been towards the earlier part of the season or end of last season, and it's definitely helped her find her footing in this season. Of course, you're still going things like the Nashers, the Rift Maker. You can go a bit more glass cannon-y. You can opt into things like Protobelt. There are options there. Gwen finding relatively large amounts of success within the jungle. Of course, a great anti-tank option, does a huge amount of AP, scales really nicely. The one kind of punishing thing with Gwen is that she doesn't have hard CC, and her ganks tend to be a bit lackluster compared to a lot of champions. So do watch out for that. If you are in a high-tempo game where there are going to be lots of kills, oftentimes it's probably not a great Gwen angle. Moving on to the standard pick, so Udyr is going to also find himself within the A tier. He doesn't tend to find as much success this season compared to last season when he had a bit better itemization. This season, he tends to struggle after like Liandry's and Jackshow. Jackshow just doesn't feel great as like a second option. Like he spikes really hard on Liandry, so this item is a great thing for Udyr. But then you do want to go into your tank variations. He doesn't find as much success on these. Of course, AD Udyr still does exist. There's still merit to running this in a lot of games. However, you are very squishy and tend to be a bit more volatile within the game. So you have to pick it accordingly. Of course, you are still looking at things like Trinity, Starix. I imagine you can opt into things like Cinder Sky on this build. I know some people go like Tiamat items, like Ravenous can be an option. You are going like Q-Max when you're going AD. Of course, AP is like your R-Max. You're playing for your AoE Storms. Udyr, solid A tier pick. Not as easy as a lot of people think here, like he should be. The stance kind of changing and being able to like utilize your passive, very important on this pick, and is often the difference between a good Udyr and a bad Udyr. Fiddle once again finds himself in the A tier. He's a bit weaker this season compared to last season. Definitely benefited more from an item like Night Harvester, but Malignance works quite nicely on him. He still finds success on like a couple of builds this season, but yeah, finds himself in the A tier at the moment. Not as high damage, but still a very solid option if you are looking for a good AP team fighting champion, assassin. Nunu also going to be in the A tier. He still finds success on both the Sunfire and the Andrews build. You tend to just opt into full tank after these. However, picking up something like a Dark Seal or a Medjay's is still relatively nice for snowballing and just keeping your advantage going throughout the game. Talia also going to be in the A tier, but playing on nothing. Talia on 14.9, once again, kind of surprising. She's not as successful within the jungle. She does find a bit more power, bit more success within elite, but like her real power in pro play comes from mid lane Talia. Within jungle, just not quite the same level of success. However, they are going to nerf it. But for this patch, she finds herself in the A tier. I believe Liandry's Talia is what people should be going in a lot of situations over things like Polludan's Companion into the Rabadons or Cryptbloom, depending on what people like end up going. But yeah, try Liandry's Talia. Should find a decent amount of success within that build. Currently an A tier pick. Amumu also going to be in the A tier. Amumu's not as successful this season compared to last season, where he would have been like an S plus tier for majority of it. He's a very simple to play champion. His CC is a great thing for like mid to low elo. Of course, high elo Mark Treads tends to be a bit more opted into. It's why Leona can also struggle within that space. Amumu is also very hard countered by Mark Treads. But for the moment, he finds himself within the A tier. He still works off things like Liandry, Sunfires, kind of akin to something like Nunu. there is merit to this champion. Solid A tier pick. Ramos, also going to be an A tier. Okay, yeah, Ramos is going to be my A tier. However, he's very close to moving up towards the S tier. There's definitely a lot of merit to this champion. Being an anti-physical pick when almost the entire meta, not meta, most of the popular champions are AD picks. Lee Sin, Viego, Master Yi, Nocturne, Vi, all very popular at the moment. Ramos is a great answer into these. He's a solid A tier pick. Yeah, works really nicely as an answer. Echo, also going to be an A tier. This is oftentimes Nash's Echo. Nash's Echo tends to be a bit more successful within the jungle over Lichbane. However, it is still something you can opt into. Spikes really heavily off Medjai's, of Rabadon's. A great snowballing AP option. Tends to be a bit easier to play than someone like Eve. A bit safer as well. Solid AP assassin option. Jarvan, also going to be my A tier. He has moved up this patch, probably towards the low end of the A tier. He's definitely not as strong as he was on like the old Gore Drinker or Stridebreaker Shojin variation. He doesn't find as much success on Sundered Sky Sterk this season, but he has been buffed twice now, and it's pushed him towards the A tier. He's a relatively simple to play champion, has great setup, and can enable carries very nicely. Karthus is also going to be my A tier. Malice made a guide on Karthus fairly recently, talking about his clear, how it's very strong, how he can very easily abuse a lot of the current items. First Strike can work really nicely on him. Malignance, I believe, is also very good on this champion. But yeah, if you want to look at Karthus kind of things, look at Malice. I know some people don't particularly like him, but like there is definitely merit towards his play style of Karthus, his clearing, his way of kind of playing the game. Karthus, solid A tier option, tends to be a bit harder to play, but you do have to consistently land your Qs. You can fight fairly consistently earlier on into the game, which is what a lot of people avoid. There's definitely situations where that can work. And yeah, find yourself as a solid A tier pick. Can work off both Stridebreaker and Titanic Hydra. I spoke about this in the top lane tier list. He actually has a lot of viable builds at the moment. And then you can opt into things like Borg, Bruisery options. And there's just a lot of merit to like all the builds he can kind of go. Just have to kind of pick what you need within the game. If you need anti-health stacking, Bork is a great option. If you want to be a bit more durable, things like Titanic, Sterks, and Sky, great in the space. If you want to go into tankier builds later on, that does function. Solid A tier pick. Jax, of course, still a great anti-auto attacker champion. Works quite nicely into things like the Xin Zhao, the Warwick it can work quite nicely into, Nocturne I believe it can work quite nicely into, Viego as well, champions which are very much punished by your E. There's lots of merit to this champion. He has a relatively nice clear. Of course, got nerfed towards the beginning of this season when he was like almost an S+ tier jungler. Right now, he's more of an A tier pick, still a solid pick, and yeah. Xin, also going to be my A tier. He is functional on both the Titanic and the Sundered Sky builds. I believe the Titanic tends to be a bit underperformant compared to Sundered Sky. You don't want to default on Titanic as much as you are. Of course, things like Sterks also very nice on him. He tends to see a lot of competitive play. If you want to learn Zinza well, you have a lot of games you can kind of look at. Very simple to play champion. Very early game skewed. You want to be getting your advantages, helping your laners out, getting your early dragons, stacking early void grubs. Xin, solid A tier pick. Vi and Lee Sin also gonna be in this space. Vi, for her simplicity, her point and click ult is very valuable. Her ability to skirmish, she does a huge amount of damage. You're running things like Halo Blades, Eclipse, and Sky, Sterks, and yeah, but you can have a lot of success on this pick. Of course, Conqueror, PTA, Aftershock can kind of work within certain situations. However, if you do want to default on a room, Halo Blades is great. Lee Sin, I've been playing a lot of Lee Sin recently. You are very much bound to your Conqueror. Of course, if you're going like a Profane Hydra build, then like Electric can be an option, or Dark Harvest even. But yeah, if you want to go something a bit more standard, just go for Conks, and then like opt into things like Eclipse, Sundered Sky. Don't want to fight too early, however you do want to get an advantage. You tend to be a bit squishier early on into the game, like your early levels can be punishing if you do fall behind. Of course, if you do find the angles, then there's lots of value there. You're actually a decent mid to late game champion compared to what you used to be. Lee Sin very much used to be early to mid game skewed. Right now he's more mid game skewed, but still has definitely skirmishing power early. The kick is very valuable later on into the game. And yeah, there's lots of power in this pick. Great duelist, great enabler of like AP picks within the mid lane, and then all round a decent very popular pick at the moment. If you put the games in, he definitely scales up into elite play. Just as a recommendable option, he's more A tier at the moment, as you do need to put games in. You can't just play him off the bat. Otherwise, you will probably just run it down. There is a very high chance of that. Zach got nerfed this patch. His health regen went down. He's definitely punished within the jungle for this, and he wasn't performing as well within the jungle compared to top lane. He's pretty close towards the bottom of A tier. He tends to be not as easy to play as like sort of Amumu or Rammus, even though he is a relatively simplistic champion. Elastic Slingshot can enable like different gank angles. That tends to be more of where the skill of his champion lies. You're looking at builds like the Leandries if you're going like a bit more AP heavy, but of course if you want something a bit more default, a bit more standard, Sunfire still works, and then you can opt into like a decent amount of tank variations like Spirits, Thorn Mail, pick up things like a Dark Seal. Champion still functions relatively fine. Solid A tier option. And Trundle, towards the bottom of the A tier as well. No longer what okay. Trundle is a solid answer to a lot of things. Once again, a lot of junglers are great answers, not as great blind options. Trundle is a great anti-bruiser, anti-tank option. If you're playing him into AP, he tends to really struggle. Of course, his Q is an AD still. His ult is a drain of magic resist, armor, health. And yeah, if you're not playing him in the right spots, he definitely struggles a lot more. As a blind pick, kind of falls down towards B tier. As an answer, more towards S plus. But yeah, for the most part, kind of sits within the A tier at the moment. Moving on to the S tier. So, going to lead it off with Ivan. Ivan's definitely performing very well at the moment. He's the only really supportive, enchanter within the jungle. You can't really flex any other options in. I guess Nidalee if you're opting into things like Ardent Sensor, but Ivan is kind of in a league of his own of what he does. The shields he can provide, the champions he can enable, of course, for W now providing on hit towards allied champions rather than just himself, definitely increases his supportive potential. Daisy, very strong summon, one of the strongest summons within the game. The CC can be very valuable on that. Learning to use Daisy correctly and being able to space Daisy within fights is definitely a skill in its own. Doesn't tend to be as hard to pilot this as something like Shaker Clone, which is a lot, I wouldn't say more difficult, but has kind of unique things where you want to drag it out tether range and then drag it back in as you're going to target the champion. Daisy tends to just be more consistently utilized as a fighter, less as a deceiver. She can also be a great vision scouter, of course. There's different ways you can use Daisy. But yeah, Ivan's solid S tier option at the moment. Rek'Sai, no longer as successful within the top lane, has kind of fallen out of top lane, if anything. Not falling out, but more towards B tier. Within jungle, she's still a very successful champion. Of course, you're looking at things like the Stride Breaker, the Titanic. Both these build options work. Sterex, Sundered Sky, you can opt into tank, you can opt into bruiser. And yeah, she's a relatively successful mid-game champion. Her AoE knockups are very valuable now. Enables her to have a bit more carry potential. And yeah, a solid S tier option at the moment. Bel'Veth, definitely a bit more elite skewed, however, still finding a relatively large amount of success within mid to low elo. Of course, you're still looking at things like the Kraken, the Stride Breaker, and kind of going down that route. I know some people like to opt into things like Terminus, as it gives you a bit more durability, whilst offering up a bit more pen. And yeah, a solid S tier option at the moment. I'm going to put Lilia as the next option, but there are a couple of other champions which I do want to cover. So Lilia is going to be within my S tier. She's still a great AP option. One of the better AP burn options, however, is still someone better than her. So I wouldn't recommend Lilia over this other champion, but Lilia definitely still finding a lot of success on the Rylai, the Leandry, the Riftmaker. Stuff like this still all work quite nicely on her. Spikes really nicely off these three items. Still a still a very successful champion. Viego also going to be in my S tier. Someone reached out to me, was talking about Titanic Hydra Viego, the merits to going that as a second item option over something like a Sundered Sky. Sundered Sky doesn't tend to have as much of a merit within its build path, whereas Titanic Hydra tends to be a bit better within this space. I believe both are viable within different games. If you want the auto attack reset and you want to kind of burst someone down, maybe you're utilizing PTA and you can get that auto attack reset to chunk someone out. there is definitely strengths there. Sundered Sky offers a bit more durability, allows you to kind of heal and sustain throughout the fight, something that Titanic Hydra lacks. Titanic Hydra also is a 200 gold more expensive, which can hurt. It can stunt you towards that second item, and then possibly third, fourth, if you're not able to consistently snowball throughout the game. But Viego still performing very well at the moment. A great time to play the champion, a great S tier pick. Nocturne, stop building Experimental Hexplate as our first item, and this champion skyrockets. He is a great pick at the moment. Go Stride Breaker, and then you can opt into something like Experimental Hexplate. You can also opt into other options, Serex, Cleaver, depending on what you need in the game. Just make sure you go Stride Breaker. This champion is incredibly good on it. Even things like Profane Hydra, also great. If you're able to like burst and like be a great single target threat, there's definitely merit to going something like Profane Hydra. Yi, also going to be my S tier. Still a great option if you're looking for someone who scales incredibly hard off gold. Kraken Slayer is a great item on this pick, and then you can kind of like opt into different things within your build. There's things like Ginsu's, Titanic Hydra are options. Of course, things like Terminus can work. If you're going a bit more tanky, things like Stirk can be something you opt into. But yeah, this champion scales incredibly hard off of gold. Great hitting, like great hyper carry within the jungle. Probably one of the best within like his kind of style, and works across all elos. Not really low elo skewed at this point. If anything, close towards high elo. I said this in my 14.7 tier list, but yeah, Yi performing really well within high elo at the moment. Is going to get nerfed down next patch, but for the moment, solid S tier option. Not quite the S plus tier, as he tends to be less consistent than the S plus options, but still a great pick. So we're left with 5 champions. Diana, Volibear, and Briar are going to wrap up the S tier. So Briar got dropped from the S plus down into the S tier. She got nerfed this patch. She's not finding anywhere near as much success within low elo, but she's still a great pick. She was by far and away the most overperforming low elo pick last patch. But yeah, nerfs this patch has dropped her down towards S tier. You're still going like your Eclipse, your Sundered Sky, your Bruiser, Steric, Bruisery options. You can kind of opt into Lethality. It doesn't tend to perform as well. Diana, one of the best AP assassins within the, probably the best AP assassin within the jungle meta at the moment. The attack speed buffs towards her a couple patches ago have been huge for itemization like Nash's, and then going down like a heavy AP path, whether it's like Rabadon's, Crit Bloom, Void Staff into heavy magic resist, stuff like that. It can all work quite nicely on Diana. Performing really well at the moment, a great S tier option, especially when you pair her with an AD mid laner. And then Volibear also dropped down from the S plus to the S tier. He's probably the highest here. He's still very reliable, great across all elos. His simplicity gives him so much merit. Sundered Sky is a great item on him. Deadman's is also an incredibly good second slot. And then we're left with 2 champions. So Skarner is the best jungler on the patch. He went from being the bottom of D tier to the top of S plus. They did the Riot Classic where they giga overbuffed the champion. He now operates way too well as a stat stick. The Q got so many buffs. In compensation, we nerfed the W, which is not something Jungle Skarner cares about anywhere near as much. But yeah, the Q getting massively buffed, massively helped this champion. His clear, his damage, his scaling, all really good. This works really nicely on a lot of the builds as well. I know some people like the Aftershock for Grasp. Phase Rush can be something you opt into. However, I would probably recommend Aftershock as like your primary rune page. Heartsteel also incredibly good on this pick. He has been hotfix nerfed, however, I'm going to leave him within the S plus tier as I just don't believe it was enough. Was enough. But yeah, this champion's still great. And then Brand. Brand is actually going to make the push from S tier into S plus. They nerfed his R, buffed his passive damage to monsters a couple patches ago. He's kind of been finding it. Well, I mean, he's been finding a lot more success on this and makes the push into S plus. He is an incredibly good AP burn dot mage. Spikes really, really hard off Leandri, works really nicely on Riley, and then you can opt into a bit more bruisery options if you're going down like the route of Zonya, Banshee. You can also opt into things like Rabadon, Crit Bloom if you're snowballing. Medjay's is also a great option. But yeah, Brand finding a lot of success, a relatively simple to play champion. Can work on both Ghost and Flash. Electrocute, Dark Harvest are like things you can opt into depending on what game you're playing. But yeah, Brand makes a push into S plus, a great AP option. And that's my thoughts on the jungle tier list. So thank you guys for watching. Oh yeah, one thing before I go, I realized that, you might notice I have a flag behind me. that's because it blocks out the light enough that the light over here, which is like shining on my face, isn't outdone by the light back there, which can just completely darken the webcam and just make it impossible to see me. It hasn't worked well enough, because if I do this, it lightens up my room a lot, because I'm blocking out the light. If anyone has any, like, great ideas on how to fix this kind of issue, whether, like, to increase the backlight, change some settings on, like, the webcam, I would love to hear. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. Those are my thoughts. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.